Good evening, everyone. My name is Kyla Hannington, and I'm the Public Engagement and Outreach Division Manager with the Curtis County Office of Human Rights. 2022 marks the 50th anniversary of our agency. We were stood up in 1972 under our original name, the Human Relations Commission, and as we celebrate our 50th year, we look at the legacy at one of the tireless advocates for our agency, Teresa Douglas Banks. Mrs. Banks, an African-American woman, gave her life literally advocating for the formation of our agency. She had a heart attack while speaking passionately at a public hearing about the need for a commission to enforce equity and equality throughout our county. She was a teacher and administrator. She fought for wage parity for African-American teachers. She was on the first town council for the town of Glenarden. She ran for school board. She helped found the Chapel Oaks Volunteer Fire Department, and she was active in her church. Mrs. Banks was a committed volunteer, an advocate, and a leader who gave her time and energy to a wide range of Prince George's County and to a wide range of areas. And we at the Office of Human Rights look to her life of service as a model for our agency, and we celebrate her legacy this year. Tonight, we are thrilled to join with our event partners, the Prince George's County Memorial Library System, who are themselves celebrating an anniversary this year, number 75. Congratulations. Wow. In bringing you award-winning poet, Dr. Jacqueline Trimble, in conversation about her stunning new collection, How to Survive the Apocalypse. Dr. Trimble lives and writes in Montgomery, Alabama, where she is professor of English and the chairperson of languages and literatures at Alabama State University. Her work has appeared in various journals, including Poetry Magazine, The Offing, The Louisville Review, and Poet Lore. Her poetry collection, American Happiness, right here, is published by New South Books. The ironically titled book examines America's refusal to grapple with hard truths, preferring instead the pretense that everyone and everything is just fine. Of the work, Honorée Jeffers wrote, "I longed for her kind of poetry, these cut-to-the-flesh poems, this verse that sings the old-time religion of difficult truths with new courage and utter sister beauty." And Randall Horton noted, "There is a jewel of a poet in the epicenter of Alabama who adeptly revisits the ugly of race, the power and legacy of familial bonds, the joys and beauty of growing up Southern, our complicated humanity." Dr. Trimble is a National Endowment for the Arts Creative Writing Fellow of Poetry, an Alabama State Council on the Arts Literary Fellow, and a Cave Canem Fellow. American Happiness was named a poetry finalist and the best book of 2016 by the newly launched Seven Sisters Book Awards and won the 2016 Balcones Poetry Prize. And Trimble's new collection, How to Survive the Apocalypse, is forthcoming from New South Books, coming up later this year. And we are so thrilled to have you. Thank you so much for being with us, Jackie.
Thank you so much, Kyla. So glad to be here.
It really does just make my face light up to see you. I can't even tell you. This is one that so for those who do not know us, I met Jackie in 2017 at a dinner, like meet and greet, where I was standing around feeling very awkward and full of social anxiety. And you were so kind. And Jackie was so kind and encouraging. And we talked about writing, and it's just, she's a wonderful person. So you should get to know her personally as well as getting to know her work. I have to say that. You're great.
Thank you.
Would you mind taking a few minutes to read a few poems so people who haven't had a chance to read it yet can get to know what you got?
Absolutely. So I think I'll read just a couple of poems, and I'm going to begin with the opening poem of the book, which is Plague. The book, after all, is called How to Survive the Apocalypse. And so we are in the midst of a kind of apocalypse now. So, of course, I wrote this poem. It's called Plague. When it comes, as it always does, do as you are told. Abandon the schools and shops, the arenas and churches. Make a list. What can you live without? Carry only what you can carry into your bunker of a house. The stockpiles of toilet tissue and disinfectant lined up like children waiting to return from recess. If you have forgotten something, check your yard or kitchen cabinets. Remember, garlic treats the flu. Cinnamon can heal the gut. Dandelion is a medicinal miracle. Don't worry if the only face you have seen is your neighbor's peeking at you from her window, or if the quiet is so quiet it sounds like prelude. If you are brave, walk out into the thirsty streets. Do not note the heaviness of the sky. Do not listen for locusts or hoofbeats. This is just another evening constitutional. Work if there is work. If not, meditate. Pretend your hunger is fasting. Listen, Israelite. You are lost in a manicured wilderness. You should rethink the necessity of touch. You should rethink necessity itself. Okay, I'll read a couple more. I'm going to read this one only because of the recent Supreme Court confirmation hearings. And this, I wrote a couple of years ago, and it's called "What If the Supreme Court Were Really the Supremes?" Oh, how their bedazzled robes shine as they glide into the courtroom. Open wide their satin-gloved arms, flutter their long store-bought eyelashes, and croon, "My world is empty without you, babe." Even Cindy Birdsong envies their hips, pop and sway, dip and snap, each one a lady. Would these judges made new by the rhythm and the blues, the ooh, ooh, baby magic of a Motown spell, ever hold the sequined fish of my voting rights above their lovely bouffant heads, tip its iridescent scales toward the camera, then gut it like a dinner trout? One of the things that I do in this book is I sort of, I guess in everything I write, is I sort of talk back to the culture. And I'm going to read this poem and then one more because, and I don't think I've ever read this poem in public. And so this will be the first time I've read this. Okay, I think you'll get it. It's called The Laws of Insurrectionists. Remember always, the Second Amendment is prettier than the First. Shoot or beat if there are too many witnesses, any protesters engaged in public displays of freedom if what is being protested is contrary to your own thinking or the internet. Wear feathers and skins as a sign that anything you can kill can also be revered in retrospect, once it has been neutralized, assimilated, or removed to parts unknown. Call the cops on bird watchers, brown folks grilling hot dogs in public parks, and unwanted neighbors just because this is still a free country, and you can. Buy white vans and fertilizer, then blow everybody up. If someone shoots elementary school children out of jealousy or dresses as a superhero and assaults sitting patrons in the movies, comfort yourself. What did I tell you to always remember? Hate abortion no matter what, period. Say blue lives, all lives, my life, our lives. He's got the whole world in his hands. I don't see color or whatever, but never ever say Black Lives Matter, lest you be thought a socialistic, unpatriotic, tree-hugging, America-hating fool. Don't be too intellectual. It's very unpatriotic, particularly unattractive in women. Champion at all costs public lynchings and executions, restrictive voting laws, the military and prisons. In fact, sacrifice everything, education, healthcare, your own kind, to build more prisons as fast as humanly possible. You must take responsibility for your family's safety. Discredit science in favor of quackery and gut feelings. Lean into your own understanding of whatever you do not understand. Do not let your children learn critical race theory. Pilgrims settled America. George Washington's teeth were wooden. Manifest Destiny was about God's will for America from sea to shining sea. Those people from Africa were immigrants, period. Clean your guns on Wednesday while listening to talk radio, and be sure to quote Martin Luther King Jr. to encourage nonviolence among those you might shoot. When the popularity of your narrative fades, or there are too many commercials with interracial couples, or you suspect that the playing field is scheduled to get leveled next Friday, riot, riot, riot. Build gallows for your own who fail to follow these laws at all times and in all ways, and think of yourself as a patriotic tourist while you do. Forget that patriotism is a form of love, the deep, abiding kind that bears its breast in a crowded bus station, makes four plaits on one head, lies counting the vagaries of a lover's breathing as a rosary, wears a mask, takes a bullet for kin and country, or loves one's neighbor as oneself. It is not that. Never, never that. Okay. And one more. So the book is sort of divided into two sections, and I think of it as kind of rage. Section one is rage, and section two is creativity, which for me is the only response that I have to rage, is to channel my rage into creativity, and the idea that this is how we survive. And so I'm going to read this only because it comes from section two. And I started thinking about how people in my life, the things that they had taught me, and maybe the things that are important, but yet we take for granted. And so this poem is actually called How to Make Neck Bones and Rice. How to make neck bones and rice. Get a pot, not Cuisinart. Something deep and well seasoned, passed down through generations, a sacred artifact of hands, too scratched and bowed for all the bits to wash away. Put in the meat, full of fat and bone. The shy meat is the meaning of life, there to be rooted out, earned by a tenacious tongue. Add salt and pepper, chopped onion, whatever you got, and seasoning. Water to make the sauce, water to stretch the broth. Forget all you have learned. Recipe, saute, braise. These do not belong here. Just touch, smell, remembered places. Put your foot in that pot. Then cook until the bones give up the ghost, until holiness floats through the house and out the door. Everybody will know your business and envy. Most people throw the rice into the boiling liquid. Cook it on the side if you want to put on airs. Your nose and eyes will tell when it's ready for the plate. This is all you need for glory. Grain and bone, hot water cornbread, the flavor of making do, the altar of your table.
Thank you. Those are so good. Thank you. So I was saying backstage that when I was thinking about poems I was going to talk to Jackie about, I basically wrote down everyone. They really are just so powerful. And I'm glad that you addressed how the collection was organized, because that was actually my first question, is that was in two sections. And, but maybe we could talk more about that. And just what were your goals for the manuscript when you sat down to write it? Did you have a plan, or did it just come out?
So I started writing poems. Most of my poetry is always a reaction to what is going on inside and outside in the world. And it's my way of making sense of things, right? And so I can't, things that puzzle me, things that make no sense, things that seem just insane to me, I have to turn to poetry to sort of see what I think about it and sort of figure it out. So I started writing these poems, and I had this idea in my head really right after I finished American Happiness, that I was going to write this book called How to Survive the Apocalypse. And the thesis behind the book is that African American people in particular, but people in general, we have survived many apocalypses. And we have survived the sort of ending poem of the collection is How to Survive the Apocalypse. And it says, live by rage and joy and turpentine. And so what it occurred to me is that the response to erasure, to violence, to all the sort of horrible things that happen to us that we must survive is creativity. That we have, that people have learned to use their creativity and sort of, channel their rage into making quilts or songs or poetry or building things, whatever it is. And it's how we survive. And so I thought about that. And so the first section begins with a quote from Nina Simone, Lord have mercy on this land of mine. We all gonna get it in due time. And it just seemed, it comes from a song of hers, Mississippi Goddamn. And it seemed to me very appropriate. And so I started to write a little essay about how to survive the apocalypse and began to think about this idea of what it is that constitutes survival. So the first section of the book is really about what we have survived and what we continue to survive. The sort of the kind of scary things in the world, the horrors, the atrocities, et cetera, et cetera. And most of those things came, straight from the news and the newspaper and things that I read and things that I read about and were quite frightening. And then the second part is called The Fire Shut Up in My Bones, which comes from a quotation in the Bible that has to do with, for me, creativity is the fire shut up in my bones. It has to do with the prophet, that, the prophet can't keep it in, he has to let it out. And so I wanted to use that second part to really explore this idea of creativity. And I thought about, in the essay that sort of begins that part, has to do with imagining a relative of mine in Western Africa, whom I hope is imagining me. And what it means to, I tell a little story about my great grandmother, what it means to value yourself, even within a context or a cultural space where you are not valued. I don't know if that answered your question.
No.
That was a lot of it.
No, and it was so, and I was thinking as you were talking about that poem, and that was one of the ones, the poem about the relative, imagining the relative, that was one of the ones that I had wanted to talk about. And the richness of the work that you have and the world. So again, backstory, when Jackie and I met in 2017, and I think I said something like, hey, what do you have going on? And you said, oh, I have a new collection. I'm starting a new collection, and it's called How to Survive the Apocalypse. And I remember, I think I laughed. I mean, like, not in a, that's so funny, I can't imagine that, but like, oh, that's timely, haha. And now that I'm talking to you in 2022, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's really timely, Jackie. Like, I mean, like I can mark my own change in 4.5 years and reading, and seeing that. I mean, if we're going to talk about today's news, we are going to need a lot more than the time that we have here, and probably some drinks and something. I mean, it's just so awful. It's so awful. And, but it's amazing to me. And I think when I talk to writers, this is not the first time it's happened where some book comes out that's like horrifyingly timely. And I feel like this collection, you were writing at, 2016, 17, 18, 19. I mean, the world is in flames in many ways during that time. But I look like today, and it's just like, it's sort of astonishing to me, actually. I don't want to sound naive, but it's a little bit astonishing to me, like what is happening every time I turn around. And I value your gift of like that creativity is a way to process or make sense or find hope, maybe.
I think it is, because it's as bad as things are now, and I know this sounds horrible to say with what's going on in Ukraine. I mean, the entire world has just gone nuts. But as bad as it is, times have been worse. You know,
Yeah.
that's what's so crazy, that as bad as it is, times have been worse. And people have survived the most horrendous things. And that's why I say we live by rage and joy and turpentine, because there's just kind of, a grit to just grinding out. We're going to make it, right? We're going to make it. And I think about people whose response to all sorts of devastation and annihilation has been to, um, we it's almost like the human being finds a way. Whether it's, I'm going to hide in an attic for 7 years, or whether it's I'm going to have an underground railroad and free slaves, or I'm going to, you can almost fill in the blank. And people find a way to survive. And I think it's very difficult when you're in the throes of crazy to kind of calm yourself. But writing this book became a sort of calming thing for me, no matter, thinking about a way to respond to all of the sort of devastating things that are going on and continue to go on, even as we speak. And to think about the fact that this does not even compare to what many of our ancestors have already survived.
There's a song by a folk singer from like maybe I'm not sure. I think she died in 1973. I don't know when the song came out, but her name is Malvina Reynolds, and she wrote a song called "There's a Bottom Below," and it says, do you think you've hit bottom? Do you think you've hit bottom? Oh no, there's a bottom below. And and the thing is, that song actually, on one hand, it maybe seems negative, but actually it's hopeful. And I think that's what that reminded me, what you said, is that like, this is terrible times and we have survived worse. Humanity has survived worse. And there is ultimately hope in that.
There's ultimately hope. I had been writing all of these poems about violence against Black bodies. And I got up one morning and I could not write another poem like that. I couldn't. My spirit was so low. I was just like, no. And so I wrote this poem called "The Language of Joy," and it's a poem that does not ignore what we have been through or what we're going through, but it's also a poem that remembers, even in the midst of whatever it is, there is still the human capacity for joy, and that we have to tap into that capacity somehow, some kind of way, even if it's just looking to a future beyond this moment.
And that was one of the poems that I wanted to ask you to read. Would you mind reading that poem?
No.
For us? Okay.
Sure.
I love that.
Okay. So I will tell you that this poem also has been, I used part of my fellowship to turn this poem into a short movie. And that was so much fun and so gratifying. A filmmaker by the name of Weta Washington, took this poem and she made it come to life. And so many people worked on it for the music, etc. So that was really gratifying. And it's been invited to and gone to 2 film festivals. So that's a lot of fun too.
What's the name of the movie?
It's called The Language of Joy.
Okay, I'm going to see if I can. Are there links on it that I can find?
No, because it's still sort of making the rounds, and so it's not public, and so you'd have to go to one of the film festivals to see it or something. But it's going to be made public probably not too long from now.
Okay, awesome. I will be looking for that.
Okay, this is called The Language of Joy. Black woman joy is like this. Mama said one day, long before I was born, she was walking down the street, foxes around her neck, their little heads smiling up at her and out at the world. And she was wearing this suit she had saved up a month's paycheck for after it called to her so seductively from the window of this boutique. And that suit was wearing her, keeping all its promises in all the right places. Indigo, matching gloves, suede shoes, dippity doo-dah in blue, with tassels, honey gold, and Lord, a hat with plume de peacock, a conductor's baton that bounced to hip rhythm. She looked so fine she thought Louis Armstrong might pop up out of those movies she saw as a child, wipe his forehead, and sing bada da bop o do de do de do do. And he did. Mama did not sing, but she was skiddly doing that day. And the foxes grinned, and she was the star of her own Hollywood musical. Here with Satchmo, who had called Ella over, and now they were all singing and dancing like a free people up Dexter Avenue. And don't think they didn't know they were walking in the footsteps of slaves and over auction sites and past where old Wallace had held on to segregation like a life raft. But this was not that day. This day was for foxes and hip rhythm and musical perfection and folks on the street joining in the celebration of breath and holiness. And they did too. In color coordinated ensembles, they kicked and turned and grinned and shouted like church or football game, whatever their religious preference. The air vibrated with music, arms, legs, and years of unrequited sunshine. Somebody did a flip up Dexter Avenue. It must have been a Nicholas brother in a featured performance. And Mama was Miss Lena Horn, Dorothy Dandridge, high stepping up the real estate, ready for her close-up. That's when Mama felt this little tickle. She thought it might be pent-up joy until a mouse squirmed out from underneath that fine collar, over that fabulous fur, jumped off her shoulder, and ran down the street. Left my mama standing there on Dexter Avenue in her blue suit and dead foxes. And what did mama do? Everybody looking at her, robbed by embarrassment. She said, "It be like that sometimes." Then she and Satchmo, Ella, and the whole crew jammed their way home.
Thank you. Thank you. I love that.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to take a moment and tell you that we do a diversity dialogue. Our office with the library, so it's myself and my friend and colleague, Michelle Hamill from the library. And we do something called the Elephant We Don't See Diversity Dialogue, where we read books and we talk about, difficult issues and try to, make the world a better place. In summary, that's not our official write-up, but that's what we're trying to do. And last week we did a book that was a little bit different than what we normally do. The book that we did was Steve Pemberton's The Lighthouse Effect: How Ordinary People Can Make an Extraordinary Impact in the World. Yeah. And I don't know if you've had the chance to read it. It's absolutely wonderful. And if I was going to summarize it, it's really showing how this, as Oprah Winfrey says, do good in the life that you have. And this book is showing stories about people who have, maybe they're famous, maybe they're not, but the difference, the impact that they've had by just living their life as they are. I mean, he does a much better job than I did. And, it's a beautiful book and I recommend it. But I mention it now because I wanted to take a minute and say that for me, when I look back on 2017 and meeting you and having the opportunity to talk to you, that was the impact that you had for me. That you were just this light and this safe space in a time. I mean, I was literally very uncomfortable, socially uncomfortable. So you were a safe space, but also you were encouraging. You were
so you're gonna make me cry.
No, but I just, you really lifted me up so much. And so one of the things I wanted to tell people who were watching is, first of all, to know that about you. But you're a professor. You've been a professor for
37 years.
37 years. So, I mean, I just had this interaction with you that night. I don't know, half an hour, got to talk to you and your wonderful husband. And it was really one of the joys of my life. But think about what that is for 37 years, the people that have had the luxury, the joy of being, in your presence and having that, your lighthouse effect, like the impact of your light on other people. And I really wanted to thank you for that, for me, but also to know that that's who you are for so
Oh
many
my
people.
God.
So, sorry, I'm not trying to, but I just wanted to.
So now you expect me to talk after that? Like, what?
But I think, I think something about that poem also had me think about that like this and the work. So I'm reading the work and I've read it, I was sent it. I was sent proofs from New South Books quite a while ago.
Yeah.
And so I've read the collection and then I reread it prepping for today. And, as you said, the first section, there is a lot of emotion there. Yeah. There really is. And it's inarguable, and then I don't even want to talk about, so some news today that I saw that I was just like, like there's so much to have a lot of feeling about. Yes. And how do we make sense of it? And how do we talk to each other through it? Right. And so I think your the kindness to others, the extending, warmth and a smile or someone's time, like that, how transformative that impact is for people. And I think, your solution, like an internal solution also, which is to create, that is really hopeful, because I do think, like, one of the things that we were talking about in my line of work in the human rights is recognizing that right now, and it's hard to be hopeful, that there are a lot of people struggling with hopelessness, and how do we address it? And that's why I found that this collection, and it's the darkness, and it is light in the darkness. And so is that what you were sort of hoping the close would be as people came away?
Yeah, and that's why for me it was the two sections. It was like, there's so many things we wrestle with, there's so many things that we have to deal with, there's so many things we have to survive. But at the end of the day, for me, we have power, and we often have more power than we recognize to make choices about how we're going to move through the world, how we're going to move through the world. And for me, the way I move through the world is the only thing I have to offer is my creativity. That's it. I can't build bridges. I can't do surgery and save a life. But, for me, creativity. And I started thinking about the ways, I don't know, it's going to sound like a weird story, but my husband and I went to Macon, Georgia, because sometimes we take, actually, I went there to do a little news show, and we take these little random trips to very inconspicuous places, and they're so much fun. So we went to Macon, Georgia, and we went to this museum there, and in just a little museum, and in the museum was a room that had like African American inventions, right? And I knew these inventions. It's like the ironing board and a vacuum cleaner and just different little things. But for the first time, I said, this is really interesting, because almost every single one of these is about making domestic work easier, right? And so I thought, oh, eureka. These folks who were engaged in this backbreaking work that they could not get out of, use their creativity to make their life easier. Like, if I'm going to have to do this, here's a better way to do it. I'm going to invent this thing that's going to, and many of the things we all use. And so I thought, wow, that's kind of what we do. We make our lives easier through our creativity. We find a way, we find a way. And I think that I am fascinated by human ingenuity. I just think it's the best thing that we have. And so I wanted that second part really to sort of speak to and sing to the kind of indomitable creativity that human beings have, even in the worst of circumstances. And, that's why I wanted to end my book with, live by rage and joy and turpentine. Right? Just keep moving. Just keep moving. Keep doing it. Hang on.
It is, and I looked up the film, and I
Yeah.
saw that there was an event, I think, or I just saw it sort of in the background
Yeah,
here,
right.
but it's the title is "Joy is a Radical Act," and
Yes.
about the film, and I think that's there was. I think there's a quote. Is it from the Bible? My husband is a pastor. I should know, but there's a quote that's something. I actually am not going to say it because I just realized it's not from the Bible, and everyone will be horrified. I thought it was from the Bible. Okay, Dan, Dan, tune out. But there's a quote that is I'm just so embarrassed. I thought it was from the Bible. Okay, living well is the best revenge.
Oh yeah.
And that's definitely not a biblical quote. So I think,
No.
but I do think that there is also there is an element in that too, that we will not let people steal our joy. We will not let people,
No, nobody will steal my joy. Nobody will steal my joy. And I think that it's really, oh, yeah. Oh, that's what I said. Okay.
Yeah, that's a good.
I think it's important. I've been teaching for a very long time, and I would say in the last 2 years I have had more students with just tremendous depression, anxiety in the last 2 years than I have seen in the whole of my career. And it has just been to the point of, having students call me up at home. A student called me up because during the pandemic, we had our office phones would go to our cell phone.
Mm-hmm.
And the student called me and I answered, and the student was like, I can't hang on one more day. And it frightened the life out of me. And I said, no, stop right here. Let's get you because we have like counselors and wellness checks. And I immediately connected her, because the thing about when you get to that point in your life, I'm not equipped. I'm not trained to counsel someone at that point. And even when you think you're saying the right thing, you're probably saying the wrong thing. So that's why you need to make sure you connect that person with a professional right then and there who can, help. And so that's what I did. And I thought, and that wasn't the only instance of that. And I'm thinking, oh my God. And it was just like what? But I thought about it. If you're a young person and having to go through, because a lot of students had to go through this alone, isolated from their families, from their friends. They had never been through anything like this. So I get it. I get why it was so hard. But this idea that, one of the things that experience has taught me is just hang on, just hang on, hang on. I think that maybe the biblical statement that you were thinking about is weeping may endure for a night, but joy cometh in the morning.
Thank you. I have to say that I you know how you kind of inch off a cliff and then there's no ground underneath you and you're like, well, here I am.
Every day of my life.
So thank you. I will say for people watching, I did put a comment in the chat, but we are open for questions. If you have any questions for Jackie or about poetry, creativity, life in general, not to set you up too much, please type them in the chat and I'll share them with her. I wanted to talk to you about the cover of the book. So as I said, I've seen the proof, so I've seen the cover, and I think I'm looking at the cover right now. Can you tell us about the picture behind you?
So this wonderful painting, this is a painting by a woman by the name of Carol Bandy Carson. She is a brilliant artist located in Montgomery, Alabama. And I actually did for the museum something called an art talk, where I talked with 3 artists about their work. So it was a lot of fun to have a conversation with them about their work. And they were having an exhibition called Who I Am, and about how, art is sort of a reflection of who the artist is, what shines through, etc. And this was one of the paintings in the exhibit. And I saw it and I said to her, I've got to have that painting. That's going to be the cover of my book. Because there's a section in the book about a Victorian woman, a Black Victorian woman by the name of Lillian Brewster Dungy. And I was like, yeah. And my husband said, why did you say I've got to have that painting? But I don't care. And so he actually ended up buying it for me for my birthday, my 60th birthday. So
I love that.
I was really excited about that. And she was so kind. She said, I would love for this to be the cover of your book, and gave us permission to use the painting. But I get to see it every day. And it's the cover of my book.
I love it. I love it. And that's a great story.
Yeah.
And good, good for her, good for you. It's, good for us to be able to see it. I'm just going to pull up my little notes here because I had a few more poems. I mean, there's so many. I mean, I don't want me just to read them all down that I so many, but a couple that as you were speaking, that really got me. And I need to say that we did an event a few weeks ago about a book called History Disrupted, which is looking at how the impact of the internet on facts and history and things. And that's a conversation for another time. But your poem about Wikipedia made me think of this. And so poor Wikipedia, they're going to think I'm out to get them. I'm not. But this poem, I have to say, I love the poem. Like,
listen, so I started writing a series of sonnets. There are sonnets all through the book, and I call them Jackie sonnets because I made up my own rules, my own sonnet rules. You can kind of recognize them as sonnets, but I follow my own thing. And so after American Happiness, or maybe right before it was published, somebody put me in for a Wikipedia entry, and I was rejected. And I thought it was just the most hilarious kind of thing. And some lady wrote on a blog about how they shouldn't have done that and something. I mean, it was just weird. The whole situation was weird. And so I decided, of course, to write a poem about it, because what else can you do? What else can you do? But when they sort of are thinking about doing a Wikipedia article on you, they have these people who sort of look. And one of the comments was, not enough information on the internet. And I thought, really, that's the criteria? Oh my gosh. So I had to write this poem. Okay, so I'll read it. And and of course, I don't know where anything is in the book anymore, so it takes me forever to find anything. But one of the things that was really funny about it was, I wonder now, since I have such a much bigger much bigger internet footprint, if they would accept me now, because if you can Google me and I pop up, so maybe I would be acceptable to Wikipedia, or as I call it.
Now the question is, do you want to be acceptable?
No, I don't. It's fine. I'll be fine. Thanks so much. Okay. So this is called FYI to the men who rejected a Wikipedia entry on me because they didn't think I was important enough. I have taught 10 bazillion students to read poetry, birthed 3 human beings on lunch breaks, survived erasure before breakfast, kept my children alive among beasts, enchanted neighbors and enemies, cooked pound cakes and collards perfectly, fashioned poems into life preservers, remained in love 400 years, balanced faith and rage on my prodigious nose. So, it is predictable you rejected me with words like unremarkable and too few references on the internet, your semiotics failing always to name me. Sirs, never heard of these men and no peer among them. I am too busy to satisfy your yardstick. And since you lack sufficient laudatory descriptors for me, try these. Stupendous educator, superhero wife and mother, ride or die friend, bearer of history, lover of sweet potato pie, vengeful as hell, practitioner of cuss words, American poet, woman, Black.
Thank you so much. We have a question here. I'm going to put it up. We have a question from Jennifer who's watching.
Hey, Jennifer.
Is that a buddy? Hi, Jennifer.
Yes, a Canadian buddy. She's from Sault Ste. Marie.
Hey, British Columbia. Okay, we'll talk later. I always get so excited when there's a Canadian in the room. It really makes me very happy. So Tony Cade Bombera says, where we are is who we are. You write a lot about Montgomery, Alabama. Do you think Montgomery has made you?
Oh, sure. I think we're shaped by our geography, our location, our environs. And for me, Montgomery is this really amazing place. We have the White House of the Confederacy on the same street with the Civil Rights Memorial. I mean, they're on the same street. We have the site where Jefferson Davis basically was made president of the Confederate States. And you can stand and look down on Dexter King Memorial Baptist Church, where Dr. King became Martin Luther King Jr. And all of these places are right there together. We have a fountain where enslaved people were auctioned, and around that fountain, it's a painted mural that says Black Lives Matter. So all of this is right there together, and so the irony is in the actual geography. And so and I'm a person who loves irony, and so being in Montgomery, Alabama is like being in a constant state of cognitive dissonance. It's like the epicenter of American crazy in the best way, because it's just like what everywhere you look, and so, yeah, I think Montgomery shaped me in a lot of ways. I mean, I went to Sidney Lanier High School, and we were crosstown rivals with Robert E. Lee High School. I mean, that was the environment I grew up in. I grew up on a street called West Jeff Davis Avenue, and the cross street was Cleveland Avenue, was later named Rosa Parks. And so West Jeff Davis Avenue and Rosa Parks intersected. You just don't get stranger than that. You can't make that stranger. And when the city finally decided to change the name of West Jeff Davis Avenue to Fred Gray, the famous civil rights lawyer, so that it would be Fred Gray and Rosa Parks intersecting. Fred Gray was the lawyer who argued the famous Montgomery bus boycott case. The state wanted to charge the city, and I don't even know if that's been settled, $25,000 for the destruction of a monument, because Alabama passed a law about the destruction of or the movement of Confederate monuments. I mean, you can't make this stuff up.
I was going to say, if you wrote a story and you had West Jeff Davis Avenue and Rosa Parks Avenue cross, people would be like, that's not realistic. That's
not realistic.
Get rid of it. And you're like, it's real. I can't get rid of it. On the note of Alabama, would you read the poem? If you don't mind, I don't want to keep making you read, but Alabama, the Beautiful America.
Yeah.
Because I think is a nice symmetry to what we're talking about right now.
Yes. Alabama, the Beautiful America. Angela Davis was born in Alabama. So were John Lewis and George Wallace. So were Zora Neale Hurston and Gucci Mane, and W.C. Handy and Nat King Cole and Hank Williams. So many blues and love songs to sing. In this land where Bull Connor and those dogs were born, and those 4 little girls in that church, and the men who bombed them, and the Confederacy, and the Civil Rights Movement, and the Black Panthers blueprint, and the Scottsboro boys who were accused, and those who bore false witness against them, and Michael Donald, who was lynched in 1981, and the boys who lynched him, and the memorial to remember those lynched all over this habitation of amber grains waving and waving something like freedom in straight lines of ascent, and then descent through the wonderland of Alabama into the eye of the beholder.
Thank you. They're so good. They really are. Let me ask you. I know we're kind of getting close to the end of time, and so I did want to take some time to talk to you about what you have going on now. Like what's happening? What are we seeing in the future about your work?
So I'm actually working on a collection called Critical Race Theory because, when people push, I like to push back, particularly with humor. And so, it's a collection where I look at the laws that the states have passed, and I take a little bit of the law and then I write a poem in response to it. And so that's been great fun. I hope it will be sardonic, funny in that sardonic, yes, I'm making fun of this way. But yet this has serious ramifications for people. And so it's not really funny, right? I'm also working on an essay that's going to be in an anthology about really women aging and how women in our society are often devalued. Older women are, devalued and sort of seen as not useful anymore. I published my first book. I was 55 years old, and I had to silence those internal, voices that said you're too old to be starting this kind of thing. Because it's like women are taught that you've had your children, you've raised your children, now go sit down in the corner and, I don't know, knit for your grandbabies, right, or something. And that's kind of not me. That's not me. So, I hope I'm doing this when I'm, 90. I hope I can. I'm working on that essay. That's a collection that's going to be, I think it's scheduled to come out maybe next year. There's an anthology that I participated in. I'm really happy about. It's all about sort of cultural images of angels. I wrote a poem for that called The Truth About Angels. That was lots of fun. And that anthology is coming out next year. I'm right for this South African television show that just the second season just broadcast and streamed in South Africa. And we have plans for, more seasons, I hope. Working on a novel that I'm really excited about. I'm working on a novel that I'm really excited about. That's called, the working title in my head is America in Translation. I think I'm having a ball with that. And thinking about or trying to figure out how to write this television series that my husband and I have come up with. So a lot of projects going on.
I was just like, that is amazing. And they all sound so amazing. But I like the novel. I'm just here for all of this. I'm so excited. Is this your first time working on a novel?
This is my first time working on a novel. So it was so weird because when I was growing up, I mostly wrote stories, like little short stories. Like, because I would tell my mother these crazy stories and she would say, that's hilarious, go write it down. And so it was like, so I always thought of myself as kind of a short story writer, that I would write novels. And then I fell in love with poetry and just stopped writing short stories. But I got this idea to write this novel, and I have a little writing group that I'm part of. And I said, okay. And I sent them the first 3 chapters of my novel, and they were like, well, what happens? We got to read this. Like, get to writing. And so just to give you a snippet of what it's about a man who believes himself to be a community organizer. He's really a gentrifier. And he shoots a child of color in the midst of playing a prank, and the community is in his face, is all behind him. And it's a woman in the neighborhood who is an older Black woman who is kind of, the one who sees things differently. And in between the chapters, there's a chapter of Greek chorus. But the Greek chorus, there's this thing that we have that's like Facebook for neighborhoods. It's called not Neighborhood Watch, but
is it Next Door?
Next Door.
Next Door, yeah.
And I read Next Door for entertainment because the people are hilarious. And I used to post things and get in arguments with people until one of my neighbors said to me, he says, your husband is so nice, implying that I was not, because I challenge him. And everybody's always looking for their missing cat or dog. And I always want to, they're like, and sometimes people put a reward. And I always want to say dead or alive. Not because I don't like animals, just because I want them to say, why is your pet always running away from you? Maybe your pet is trying to tell you something. Like, what is happening? So in between the chapters are these next door discussions that function as the Greek chorus for what is going on. And I hope that it's both funny and skewering.
It sounds completely genius. So let me say two things. Number one, if you would ever like me to read it, I'd love to read it. And number two, when your next collection comes and this comes out, we as the Office of Human Rights, the library system, we would love to have you back again. Absolutely. To highlight your work, because your work has just been so completely amazing. CT has a comment about pets that we'll share. CT Salazar, our wonderful friend from Mississippi, wonderful poet.
Oh, CT, I think you're right. You must be looking at Next Door, because that's exactly right.
So
those
I have
to trying to escape for their lives.
I have to say, unfortunately, we're out of time, but I do want to take a couple minutes for all of the people watching at home and to talk about how you can support Jackie. So her first book, which we've talked about a few times, is this absolutely wonderful book called American Happiness. I have said this many times. I'll say it again. I gave this collection to everybody that I knew for Christmas 2017, because 2017 is when it was brought into my life. It is that good. It is that amazing. So you can get that now from your favorite independent bookstore. You can get it right now. And her new collection, How to Survive the Apocalypse, was supposed to come out in the spring. We've just found out it's going to be pushed back a few months, but you can pre-order it now, and then you will be delightfully surprised in a couple months when it arrives at your door. And obviously, we've got more work coming from you that we'll hopefully be able to see soon. Jackie, it's been a pleasure and a gift to have you with us again. Thank you so much. So I want to take one more minute and say, for those of you at home, we do have a few other events coming up just this week alone, actually. Tomorrow night, our Prince George's County reads on the book A Question of Freedom, The Families Who Challenged Slavery from the Nation's Founding to the Civil War. This is a book that talks about enslaved Prince Georgians who fought slavery through legal means and really changed the face of law and the nation through their efforts. We are reading chapter 6 on that at Prince George's County Reads. You can get the login information by going to our friends, the library, pgcmls.info/events, and look for tomorrow, and you can register for that. And then on Wednesday, we are co-hosting with the library an absolutely ginormous panel discussion on the theme of, does your zip code impact your whole life? We are looking at health. We're doing a deep dive on health. We've got the county health officer, Dr. Ernest Carter. We've got people coming from Johns Hopkins University. We've got people from the state of Maryland. It is going to be a huge discussion about the impact about where you live on your health lifelong. So we welcome you to join us, and you can learn about that and all of our events by checking out our events webpage, checking out the library. I'm going to stop talking. Jackie, thank you so much.
Thanks, Kyla.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Bye.